The Ministry of the Prophet Muhammad through the Quran. Chapter 4. The Abundance. Following the previous revelations of the Lord, it had become clear to the Prophet that his people were not immediately going to heed the call of their Lord as he had anticipated. He later on came to understand that his duty was not to convince anyone of his prophethood or messengership, but rather to simply convey God's messages unto the people in their fullest, so that those who wanted to take heed may receive admonition, whereas those who were in denial and didn't want to amend their ways may continue in their transgression against the law of the Lord. For that which the Lord had inspired unto his servant was truly an abundance indeed, a mercy and a healing for the hearts of man, wherein those who desired the meeting of their Lord may take comfort in its rhythmic and hypnotically melodious verses. And with it, they could draw nearer in contact with the divine through communion and remembrance. Thus the Lord declared concerning it in a few short but hauntingly beautiful sentences, saying, "We have indeed granted thee the abundance. So commune to thy Lord and offer thyself up, as assuredly indeed thy nemesis is truly the one cut off." Such were the definitive words of declaration from the Lord. For therein the Lord announced unto his servant about the immense bounty that was the revelation which had been poured into his heart, for it had been taught to him by one who is exalted above the throne, the Lord of majesty and grandeur, besides whom there is none other. The abundance of the revelation lie in its ability to move the hearts and minds of those who had goodness within them, those who yearned for the prospect of hearing God's word and who trembled at the thought of meeting their Lord, but yet rejoiced all the same. The prophet was encouraged by the Lord in this revelation to not worry too much that his efforts were being met with so much resistance from his people. For the Lord had indeed granted him the abundance, and in this abundance was a copious amount of good for the people. For it was a blessed writ from the Lord of all the realms of existence, which the trustworthy and honorable Spirit had descended unto the heart of the prophet, in an Arabic tongue, so that he may become a warner to the people. In it were blessings, mercy, healing, glad tidings, warnings, wisdom, teachings, laws, and on top of it all, its rhythmic verses could be beautified by the tone of its reciter and easily committed to memory for later remembrance, as the Lord had made it easy and simple to remember. Those who heard it betook it to be a spell which had the ability to dazzle and hypnotize its reader. For when it was recited, it vibrated through the reader's body, causing its reader to fall into a trance of utter ecstasy. Many of those who were opposed to it would go out of their way to avoid even listening to it, for they were afraid that it might take a hold of them without their knowledge. And so they would resort to making noise during its recitation in order to drown it out, and they would urge other people not to engage the prophet when he read it to them. Such was the abundant impact that the revelation of the Lord had on the people. And so the Lord encouraged the prophet that he needed not to worry, as those who had goodness in their hearts would be able to distinguish truth from falsehood, and they would be able to benefit from it just by hearing it, and that his only duty was simply to convey it unto the people. Other than that, the prophet had to establish communion with the Lord and offer himself up in submission to God, dedicating his entire being to the divine in whatever he did. His entire living or livelihood, his death, his communion, his sacrifice, all had to be dedicated to God alone, the Lord of all the realms of existence. As for those who harbored hatred or animosity towards the prophet, then they would be the ones who are cut off from the abundance, for they do not value goodness to others, as they spend their days hindering people from drawing nearer to their Lord, and as such, they do not have anything to gain from the reminder. They are perfectly comfortable in living their lives in oppression of others and persecuting others for their beliefs. And as such, the Lord declares concerning them, saying, "Did thou, O Muhammad, not see the one who prevents a servant when he communed? Did thou even think to consider if he were upon the guidance, or if he enjoined conscientiousness and self-restraint? Did thou think to consider if he had denied and turned away? Did he not know that God sees? Nay, If he had not ceased, we surely would brand him by the forelock, a lying, error-prone forelock. Let him then call out to his supporters, we shall summon the repelling sentries. Nay, do not obey him, but prostrate and draw thou near. In these verses, the Lord had pointed out to the prophet of those individuals who insist on the hostility and ill treatment of others simply based on their religious beliefs or affiliations, even when those beliefs do not call for unwarranted harm of others. Such people simply possess a deep-seated hatred towards others of a different class, and so they thus see that as a justification for behavior pertinent to discrimination and persecution. In this revelation, the Lord draws our attention, as well as the prophet's attention, to an individual who saw it fit to harass another individual while he was engaging in communion with the divine. Though unprovoked, this individual was immensely disturbed by simply observing another person express his belief in a public setting, that he decided to interrupt him during his devotional duties to God. He didn't even stop to ask whether this individual had been rightly guided or whether he was instructing people to be conscientiously aware of the treatment of others. Yet, he saw it fit to discriminate against him and deter him from continuing in his devotional duties. Such individuals tend to be insecure in their personhood, and they possess an unrealistically high sense of self-importance. And as such, they need to present themselves at the forefront of every incident. They require constant and excessively undeserved admiration, demanding privileges that they do not deserve, and desperate to be seen as superior to others even without having achieved anything worth mentioning. Furthermore, they are incapable or unwilling to recognize the needs and feelings of others, and they take advantage of others to get what they want. They are ignorant, envious, paranoid, boastful, and conceited. Similarly, such people have difficulty handling criticism, often resorting to being angry or impatient if they don't get the recognition they think they deserve. They often react with rage and contempt in an attempt to belittle others, and as such they have no sense of awareness of how their behavior impacts their surroundings. Thus, they do not realize that God does in fact see whatever they do. And so, for such people, the Lord declares that He will indeed brand them by their forelocks, their lying and mistakenly prone forelocks which lead them to behave in such unbecoming ways. Against such people, the Lord shall summon the sentries which shall repel all their advances and lead them into destruction. Thus the prophet was instructed to not obey such people, but to instead prostrate or submit himself and draw nearer to God. For it was in this nearness to God that he would find purpose and a will to continue on in his mission against such opposition.